The Geek on Skates writes in to ask. That's the name of the person who just wrote in. The Geek on Skates wrote in, said, I've been looking for a good cross-platform API application programming interface for some terminal applications, mostly games I've been working on. And I found one in Mono, a .NET compatible runtime for Linux. Of course, part of me is thinking, awesome. I can build stuff like that, stuff that works for Linux guys like me and Windows guys like literally everyone else I know. But then I kind of wonder if that's part of Microsoft's evil scheme. Embrace, extend, extinguish. They made these awesome tools that actually help experienced Windows devs, guilty, lol, do stuff on Linux. Am I struggling between the light and the dark side of the force here, or am I just watching way too many Stallman videos? P.S. I am not an Arch user. To start with, this might be a first for me of someone making a point of saying that they don't use Arch. So good on you, Geek on Skates. Okay, let's break this down. Are you struggling between the dark side and the light side of the force by thinking about using Mono? And the answer is a little bit. Personally, here's my thoughts. If you're opting into using Mono, which is, C#, Visual Basic, any of the other Mono CLI languages and the .NET runtime stuff, you are buying into the Microsoft ecosystem a little bit, for better or worse. I mean, there's good and bad that comes with that, like with just about everything. So is it overall a bad thing or a good thing? That is 100% up to you. That is totally up to you. My personal thoughts are stay away from it like the plague. And here's why. While Mono is open source, Mono is also controlled essentially by Microsoft. The Mono people were hired by Microsoft. Microsoft bought the company that was working so diligently on Mono. And so I don't personally trust it, because the reality is at any point Microsoft can say, I'm going to make significant API and ABI compatibility changes to .NET and possibly to Mono that will render Mono applications. They might still run under the Mono runtime, but they may not function all that well, say, on Windows anymore, etc. And I don't necessarily like that. Now, I may be being alarmist here. However, it's not unusual for Microsoft to do that sort of thing. It's part of embrace, extend, extinguish. You embrace something, then you extend it to the point where people are relying on the extensions you've made, and then you extinguish it somehow by making it so that they can no longer use whatever else it was free and based on in the past. So I personally wouldn't go that route. I would suggest some of the other alternatives. Knowing that you are a Windows dev and whatnot, you've got some experience on the Mono, .NET, etc. side of things. I don't blame you for that. I developed Windows software at one point too. I think a lot of us have. I think a lot of the Linux devs that work at the Linuxy companies have also worked on some Windows stuff over the years as well. So it's not that unusual. We're devs. We code things for a variety of platforms. I made Palm OS software. I even worked on a Game Boy Color thing once. I mean, people go all over the map, right? So here's what I would say. Instead of going Mono, pick something that is not controlled by any company and is a little more lightweight, because there are some downsides to using Mono, whether you're on Windows or Linux or other platforms. To be honest, the requirements are fairly large, especially if you're building terminal applications. If you're building, you're building some terminal apps in Mono, that just seems like overkill to me. Here's what I would do. I would pick something completely basic, and not necessarily the basic language, though that would work too, but I mean like C. Just go with C, because you don't really need all the UI stuff. You don't need all the UI toolkits. The reality is maybe curses, some of the other TUI toolkits out there, the text user interface toolkits, are very, very tiny, super, super tiny, and go with C. If you don't like C, go with basic. I mean, why not? Go with something like FreeBasic. FreeBasic is GPL'd. It runs BASIC. It has some object-oriented stuff to it, and it'll run binaries on Linux and Windows and Mac and a whole bunch. I think they even have an Xbox port, which is just really weird. But if you don't like that, go over to Pascal. The free Pascal compiler, FPC, is incredibly fast. And I know it's Pascal, so if you don't know Pascal, that might be a hindrance. But for making great, terminal applications that'll run on Linux, Windows, DOS, everywhere else, free Pascal is not bad. Not bad at all. Another benefit there is, and it is Pascal, so there's downsides to using Pascal, but free Pascal is also the basis for Lazarus, which is this big, rapid development environment, which is sort of like Borland's Delphi, or which is kind of like the Pascal equivalent of Visual Basic. It's a visual forms designer that uses Pascal, and it compiles down to native code on whatever platform you're running on. And the really cool part about Lazarus is that you can choose which UI toolkit you want to use at compile time. The code is the same no matter which UI toolkit you use. So let's say you want to make a Win32 application for Windows. Boom, you just check that radio button, it spits it out. Let's say you want to make a Linux app though. You can make it in GTK2. You can make it in Qt. You can make it in, I believe, WX widgets. There's a bunch of options, and each one will have the native look and feel because it's using the native toolkit for that particular target. And that's really, really cool. And by doing that, you are not buying into any corporate controlled software ecosystem even a little bit. And Mono is debatable about how much it's corporate controlled because so much of it is open. However, we are reliant on Microsoft patents. We are reliant on Microsoft not changing too much in the .NET side of things or the Mono side of things. And the people who are working on that are predominantly over at Microsoft. So I would say steer clear, personally. There's nothing wrong inherently with Mono from a tech perspective other than it is a bit big, a bit bloated, and it just is, especially for terminal applications. But my personal preference would be to go something a little more lightweight. C, Basic, Pascal, or heck, go with a scripting language. Go with Python. Python runs great cross-platform. You pick up Python, I mean, it's just going to be inherently open. You can run Python on Windows or Linux or Mac or what have you. You do need to put on some extra runtime environments in order to be able to run those Python scripts, but you have to do that with Mono anyway. So maybe personally, I would stay away from Python then because then it's harder to distribute. No, you can do Python to executable compilers. There are some of those. Py2exe, I believe, is the name of it. I'm trying to remember. I know there are ways to do Python executables that are standalone on Linux and on Windows. I think the name is different for each of them. I was trying to remember the one for Windows. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but it is doable. But personally, I would almost just go with C, man. I would just whip it out. It's so old school, There's something glorious about doing that. Something just real old school. That's the way I'd go. I'd go wicked old school. And this episode is brought to you in part by Linode. Go to linode.com/Lunduk. Yeah, there's a URL on the Linode servers that has my name in it. Go there and you get a $20 credit off of any service you sign up for. So if you want to go sign up for some Linode services, some virtual hosting, whatever, if you want to set up a Nextcloud instance, go over to Linode, set it up, you get a $20 credit. Boom. You can set up a little Nextcloud instance. They even have it set up right now where you can get dedicated CPUs inside of your virtual host. So what's cool about that is if you're doing something that's very CPU intensive, like let's say video chat using Nextcloud or anything else, it's a little more CPU intensive on the server side. Actually, no, the CPU intensivity on Nextcloud for the video chat, I think, is all on the client side. But let's say you were doing, what's that video chat thing I was using for a while? I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, if you're using it, You can go over to Linode servers, set up a Linode server with dedicated CPU hosting. My brain just completely melted down. Linode.com/Lunduke. $20 credit. You can't go wrong with that. And then you can go over to Lunduke.com and find the other stuff. I should probably drink some caffeine because clearly my brain has stopped working. And I don't know, does caffeine help with that? I'm not certain. But what I do know is this.